Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, joining you for some live talk on a Saturday night at 9 o'clock Eastern time. So I thank you so much for joining in. And if you are discovering us for the first time, because I know a lot of people just surfing YouTube will see a number of platforms that go live and just like to check out the live streams and see what people are talking about. Well, here it's college football all the time, 24/7, 365. We are the voice of college football. So what that means is, yes, I've got a voice. And of course, you've got a voice. So we welcome you in with your comments, suggestions, your questions, and of course, the debate and discussion that rules supreme here at Mark Rogers TV. And we've got the voice of media contributors. Unlike any other platform, you're going to find talking college football every day. Media contributors from all over the place. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and find out. And of course, the audio, if you just want to hear the audio, driving to work, working out on the treadmill, whatever you're doing, just want to hear the audio and not look at me, I can understand that. The audio you can find at iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Podbean. I shouldn't have to read it off the sheet, should I? Stitcher, Podbean, Google Play, and iTunes. It's all at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, just here in the last month. So I looked at the videos that we have produced just in the month of March. March Madness for everybody else that's following college basketball. And if you are joining the party here on the live stream, we appreciate it because we know who's playing right now. I believe Michigan and whoever they're playing college basketball right now. And I will check out the second half. I know Loyola Chicago has completed their Cinderella run, or at least to the Elite Eight, or at least to the Final Four. To the Final Four. Yes, they're in the Final Four now, right? Or no, they've got to play. They're in the Final Four. So help me out on the college basketball. Again, college football, all college football right here. In the month of March, we have had contributors on it from Texas, Ohio State, Nebraska, Penn State, Michigan out of the Big Ten, Miami and Florida State, Florida, South Carolina, Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, Missouri, LSU and Tennessee, USC and UCLA. From platforms like 247 and Rivals and Scout and Gridiron Now and the Ozone and Husker Extra and SB Nation, of course, all over the place with some great football coverage. Also, most of the people, most of you viewers, I know are locked into the Power Five like I am and watch the big games and the big teams. But there's an interesting conversation I had a couple weeks ago with Air Force head coach Troy Calhoun. So even if you don't follow Air Force, and of course they play a reputable schedule and played Michigan very close last year, for example, went to a bowl game, or they missed a bowl game last year at 5-7. But typically Air Force in postseason play. You want to check out the interview with Troy Calhoun, the head coach there for the past 9 or 10 seasons, because it's just interesting to hear from a head football coach of a major football program. And of course, the unique quality of coaching the young men at one of the military academies. I'm going to strike up the live chat and see what you guys have to say as well. All right, this week, we've got contributors on board to talk to us from Big 12, Arizona, Minnesota, UCLA, the SEC, and we're going to get started on our NFL draft coverage. So you've got to join that as well. Let's get to the chat right now, and let's see if anybody's jumped on board, and certainly we can answer your questions. Ryan Mel, how you doing tonight, Ryan? Good to see you. Good to hear from you. And I'm just going to run through what has caught my eye over the past few days. And again, we have talked in recent days about breakout players for 2018. That includes a number of players we have yet to get to, so hang on. But we've talked Dwayne Haskins at Ohio State along with J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber. Considering your definition of breakout, for me, this is what a breakout player is. He's either a guy who we don't know about because he only plays special teams, let's say, or gets spot duty at a particular position. But because of his tremendous talent or ability to develop, maybe from a freshman to a sophomore, maybe he was redshirted, or possibly that particular team has a great need at that position, he's going to break out. He has to break out. He has to become a starter, an impact player, or the breakout player is a guy who is a really good player. He's a known commodity to a certain extent, but he has the potential to be a superstar. Maybe somebody's going to clear the way for him. Somebody has moved on to the NFL that's going to clear the path for him to get more receptions, more carries, become the leader of the defense, and become a star in college football. That's a breakout player to me. So we've talked about Dwayne Haskins and Baron Browning at Ohio State. Browning, a 5-star linebacker who's been hobbled by injuries, who's going to be counted upon this year. Trey Bryant, speaking of injuries at Nebraska, gained 299 yards in the first 2 games for the Huskers last season against Oregon and Arkansas State. Then he went down with chronic knee problems. They believe that those are cleared up. He's still not participating in spring drills in Lincoln, but Trey Bryant, keep the name on the forefront of your memory for 2018. Miles Sanders, of course, in replacing Saquon Barkley at Penn State, actually a more highly touted player coming out of the high school ranks to Penn State. Jalen Phillips in our UCLA coverage with Mike Regalado and Tony Siracusa. Jalen Phillips, the outstanding, highly recruited player a couple of years back. Again, he's already an impact player, but could become a national star this season. We talked about him. Nate Metters at corner for the Bruins. Gerald Willis, a great breakdown from Kim Underwood from State of the U on Gerald Willis, or Joe Willis, who was a 5-star who originally enrolled and was on campus and in pads at Florida, then transferred to Miami. We're going to talk about a number of breakout players. I've got T. Higgins on the map, Kalavon Chason, the linebacker at LSU out of Houston, who's ready to break through in a big way. Charlie Brewer taking over at quarterback for Baylor. He, of course, played most of last season, had a nice season with 11 touchdowns and 4 picks as well. All right, who's on the chat? Ryan says, since I'm a Georgia fan, I guess the breakout players for next year will be DeAndre Swift and Riley Ridley for the returning players. So exactly. So that's kind of the next level of breakout player. So if you watch college football, you have to know who Riley Ridley is and DeAndre Swift. They are 2 extremely talented players. Of course, Riley, the brother of Calvin, and DeAndre Swift, the 3-headed monster, him being the number 3 behind Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. You would think they have cleared out the carries going to the NFL, and DeAndre Swift could put up some massive, massive numbers. Frank joins in with Darius Lemons from Florida. That's a great pick. I would like to, in the next time we get one of our Florida contributors on, and we just had a discussion a couple days ago with David Waters from Gators Breakdown, get his thoughts on one Darius Lemons. So, Frank, if you have anything to add concerning Darius Lemons, would love to hear your take on why he will be a breakout player for 2018. Ryan comes back with Brenton Cox. Yes, Tyson Campbell for the freshman class. And that's the thing that I like to wait on, especially in breaking down the positions across the country. So my attempt this summer, starting in May after spring practice, will be to rate every position in college football nationally top 10. Top 10 quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, offensive line, defensive ends, defensive tackles, linebackers, cornerbacks, safeties, special teams, all the way across the board, top 10 nationally. Then as far as I can get, I would love to dive into each conference and rate the top 5 at every position as I've done in the past. And I like to wait till after spring practice when I've got a better feel for who's going to play and play a role and who's played well as a freshman in the spring. Now, if you're a stud cornerback like a Tyson Campbell, most likely you are going to see significant time, if not as a starting player, as a freshman. The quarterbacks, of course, have to battle for the starting spot. So Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, those guys, we have yet to see whether they're going to be serious threats at those position battles. All right, Darnell jumps in. Let's go Canes. So, Darnell, I'm thinking and hoping that you've caught our Miami coverage. We had a great discussion with Cam Underwood this past week and still have 2 more segments to release with Cam from State of the U. We talked quarterback, of course. That's on the minds of all Miami fans, the quarterback position in the aftermath of what most hope and most believe will be Malik Rozier's final season as the starting quarterback in 2017 with Kosi Perry and, of course, Jaron Williams battling it out. But, of course, Malik Rozier is going to be in the fray. I know most people don't want to hear that, but he will be given a shot to keep his job. Loyola is indeed in the Final Four. Yes, that makes total sense. I'm not that removed from college basketball to forget. And I used to watch a ton of college basketball and covered college basketball in the SEC for 6 years. But that, of course, the Thursday, Friday games are trimming down from the Sweet 16 to the Elite Eight, and then the Saturday, Sunday games, of course, for entry into the Final Four. So this is a great story, of course, with Loyola Chicago. And who is the, I believe she's a nun. If I misrepresented her, I apologize, but who watches her team, Loyola Chicago, and has become a national celebrity. She's like 98 years old. So I'm sure somebody will supply me with that information. But it's a great story. A 10-11 seed, right? Kansas State was the 9, Loyola Chicago the 11. We've seen George Mason as an 11 advance to the Final Four in 2006, LSU in 1986. Villanova, of course, the lowest seed to win a national championship in 1985 when they had to shoot 78% to beat Georgetown. All right, back to the college football talk. I think DeAndre Swift is almost a guarantee because he got 600-plus yards on 81 carries. The kid's electric. He's electric. So hopefully the mic picks up when I check out the live chat here. Florida freshman Amari Burney and Trey Dean. I know the names from the recruiting cycle. I don't know a whole lot about them, Frank. So we'll look into that as well. And again, hopefully you've caught our segments that have been released from David Waters from Gators Breakdown. We've talked Florida quarterback position. We've talked Dan Mullen's impact on the program through just a few months. And there is more coming from David Waters from Gators Breakdown. And I'm going to let you know, slide over to his YouTube channel if you love Florida football and subscribe there. Don't unsubscribe to me if you love college football because I've got it covered coast to coast. All right. So we also, yes, in addition to talking about breakout players, and I've got a list a mile long, in keeping with the NCAA tournament theme, who could be the sleepers for 2018 in college football? Who could be, of course, the championship contenders? I know a lot of people have released brackets. Maybe I should have done that this year. Expand the field to 64. In college football, there are 68 Power 5 teams. So the 5 conferences plus Notre Dame, Army, BYU, and UMass. 68 teams have a 64-team field. Who would win it? Well, the same teams would make their way to the finals. There would be some upsets. I saw that listing on ESPN.com in particular with their brackets. And of course, they had to pick a few upsets in there, but it all came down to Clemson, Georgia, I believe was the final. Bus for this year. Who could possibly be the bus? So take what you believe to be the most accurate preseason top 10, top 25, and who are the teams that won't meet those expectations, those lofty expectations? So right now, we believe in the Pac-12 that the contenders will be most notably USC and Stanford. And then on the periphery, possibly Oregon. And not too many other teams, really. It's really looks like USC and Stanford. Possibly Oregon jumps in there. Washington State looks to be a bit down this year. And it seems pretty clear-cut in the Pac-12. Now, in the Big 12, we would expect Oklahoma's going to take a step back. But the teams in the running are Oklahoma, Oklahoma State. I am really curious about Texas. Then we've got Oklahoma State or West Virginia as well. In the SEC, it's Alabama, it's Georgia, Auburn, LSU. That's pretty much it. Clemson, Miami, Virginia Tech, possibly Florida State. In the ACC, we'll see what NC State does without the likes of Bradley Chubb and Naheem Hines moving on. In the Big Ten, it's Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State. In the East, it's Wisconsin and maybe Iowa or Northwestern in the West. But who's going to break out from the periphery to possibly challenge, like an Iowa did in 2015 for a national championship and going 12-0 before they lost to Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game? Ryan says, I think Georgia's tight ends are going to break out next season just because with Jake Fromm having the trust of the play caller to pass it more. However, Georgia will still run the ball more. What Jake Fromm did specifically against a marginal defense, albeit in Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl, was still mighty impressive. On that stage in the final 3 minutes of the game, needing a touchdown to tie, and the plays that he made, not just the ability to move the team, but he made most of those plays himself. He made some under pressure throws. He used his legs to escape trouble, picked up a first down, a key first down around midfield by running out of contain and picking up the first down. And then one particular throw that I can remember, he was flushed right and he kept his eyes downfield and made a great throw. So Jake Fromm, yes, he relied on the running attack to set up the throw. That was obvious throughout the season, but they gave him a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then against Oklahoma, they needed him, and he pulled through. And he played a decent game in the national championship game against Alabama. Who do you think the starting quarterback will be for the Arkansas Razorbacks? So Randy Rhodes chimes in, and hopefully, Randy, you've checked out our discussion with Andrew Hutchinson from 247 Sports this week talking Arkansas football. And I posed the same question with Cole Kelly and with Ty Story, the candidates there in Chad Morris's first season. So right now we believe, based on Andrew's observation and his perspective, and I'll take it from him since he's right there at practice just about every day. And that's the nice thing about what we've got going here at Mark Rogers TV is most of the people that I talked to, in particular this week, the media contributors, they're at practice. Drew Krinsky from Trojan Insider, USC practice, heads straight home, jumps on the line with me and provides great perspective. So between those two quarterbacks, it looks like a 50-50 competition right now. And I believe Ty Story, according to Andrew, has a nudge of a lead. I will be checking out the spring game to see how those two guys look. Randy, yes, with Arkansas quarterback play. And Ryan, I don't think Oklahoma State or TCU will be as good, but I think Kansas State and West Virginia will be better this coming season. The first thing that comes to mind there is, of course, West Virginia with a veteran quarterback in Will Grier, unlike most of the contenders in the Big 12, without that signal caller who's proven, like Baker Mayfield, Mason Rudolph coming back. West Virginia in good place, in good standing there. Also, I've got a category of who are the most intriguing teams in college football? Who are the mystery teams? Yeah, we know Ohio State's going to win 10, 11, 12 games. We know that Rutgers is going to be awful, but who are those teams that you think, okay, this is a wild card team? They could win 6, they could win 11. They bring a bit of mystery. It's a wild card, and the team that comes to mind is out of the Big 12 in Texas. They were so good on defense last year. They held Oklahoma under 30. They held Oklahoma State to 13 points and went to overtime. They were in every game. They had the double overtime game at USC that gave us the first glimpse and idea that Texas could be partially back, playing very well at the Coliseum. But they lose most of those guys. They lose Deshaun Elliott. They lose most of those big-time players that they had on the defensive side of the ball that led that team to the bowl victory over Mizzou and the best season in Texas for the past 5 or 6 years. Well, they've got Buechele and Ellinger, and neither one of them have turned out at this stage in their careers to show us that they can be dynamic quarterbacks and win games. They just don't lose games. So who's going to win that quarterback battle? And is the defense going to be as good? My belief is Tom Herman has this program on the verge of regaining status nationally. And the first step in that is competing in the Big 12, which they certainly did last year, and going 5-4 in the conference. And I think Texas, to me, is very intriguing. I'm intrigued by Texas. I'm curious about UCLA competing in the Pac-12 South because the division just isn't that good. USC's the best team, but they are not scary this year, but they've got the best talent, the best roster, but the quarterback turnover. And we talked about that this week with Drew Krinsky from Trojan Insider. Everybody in USC fandom is waiting for JT Daniels to show up in August. But until then, it appears as though Matt Fink is out playing Jack Sears at practice in the spring. Do you think Tate Martell should start for Ohio State? Tate Martell is in a position because of his ability and because of the quarterback situation at Ohio State. They need to place him in a position to contribute. And because of what I've seen and what I've heard from the scouting reports is that he brings that running style and kind of that Tim Tebow impact as a runner, as a fullback style quarterback, that I'm sure that they can get him on the field, use him as a runner first and foremost, but then give him some safe throws and let him play against some teams. I think the quarterback position is open at Ohio State. I think we've taken too much from 7 throws that Dwayne Haskins made against Michigan. They were very impressive throws. He hit 6 of 7. He came into the game down a score, needing to score early in the fourth quarter, made that tremendous throw on a 3rd and 18, an NFL-type throw on the slant, throwing the ball before Austin Mack broke and drilling him to complete the play, make the first down, eventually score the go-ahead points against Michigan. Again, completed 6 out of 7, couple third down conversions that were well-thrown balls, made the right decisions, but it's 7 throws. So we've got Joe Burrow in play at Ohio State along with Tate Martell. So I believe that Urban Meyer is keeping in the back of his mind that, yes, Dwayne Haskins, if everything is close, has already shown me that he can do it on the biggest stage against our arch rival, against a very good defense, under pressure, down 6 in the fourth quarter, late third quarter. So he would be the guy that I would opt for if the chips are down. But Ohio State does have 2 games before TCU, 2 games that they should win handily. So they have time to play around with the quarterback situation before they face TCU. With the current changes to the Big Ten landscape, do you see new competition from Wisconsin and others who pressure the upper tier teams? Meaning the landscape, first and foremost, I think you're talking about Scott Frost. He is not going to challenge for a Big Ten championship in year 1. And this is one of my subjects for tonight. It's intriguing to me, the division formats and the scheduling in all the conferences. And I took note most recently in the Big Ten, where Nebraska has the most difficult schedule in the conference. So, as you guys know, outside of the Big 12, the rest of the conferences don't play everyone. Therefore, it's extremely important who you do and don't play in the other division. So consider the Big Ten Western Division. The best team's Wisconsin by far right now. Northwestern, I don't believe, is going to be as good. Clayton Thorson's health is up in the air. They have lost the NFL cornerback. Can't think of his name. Buike, I believe, is his last name. It's escaping me right now. And of course, Justin Jackson at running back. Wisconsin's the class of the division. Nebraska, if you look at the Big Ten Western Division, let's start there. Everybody plays everybody in division, of course. Then you play 3 of the 7 teams in the Eastern Division. And for Nebraska, it's Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State. Those 3 teams last year went 20-7 in the Big Ten. That by far is the toughest schedule in the Big Ten, and certainly in the Big Ten Western Division. Wisconsin, on the other hand, Nebraska's chief competitors in the West, if they are to contend, Wisconsin gets Penn State, tough game, of course. Rutgers and Michigan, those 3 teams combined to go 15-12. So Nebraska doesn't catch a break in scheduling for sure. Scott Frost is the right guy to be in Nebraska. I don't think anyone has questioned that hire. It works from a football standpoint in regards to a guy that is proven at the group of 5 level that he can build a program, that he can inspire a team. So he's a great CEO, is what he has shown us thus far. He's a great game coach, and he's a guy that schemes well. The kids love him. They respect him. They play for him. That's the total package. Now, can he do it in Lincoln, Nebraska to their expectations when he has no recruiting around him, not much of a base around him? He's got to go to Texas. He's got to go to Florida. He's got to grab a few guys from the Midwest. But in terms of in-state talent, of course, that's not good enough there to compete at the level Nebraska fans hope and expect. We talked to Parker Gabriel from Husker Extra this week about Nebraska football. Please check that out. I edited that just into one long segment with Parker Gabriel talking about everything top to bottom with Nebraska football. Breakout players, quarterback situation, Scott Frost, coaching staff, recruiting. Matthew Gonzalez. All right. We already read Matthew's comment. Okay, Ryan. This might sound crazy, but I think Maryland could be competitive next year. And I think if Wake Forest can get good quarterback play, they could be an ungodly offensive powerhouse. One of the oddest emerging factors in college football the past few years has been the Wake Forest passing game in particular and the offense in general. Ryan, I'm all over it as well. We used to have Robert Reinhardt from SB Nation come on to talk Wake Forest football, and at that point, they were abysmal offensively. They played good defense, and this was about 3 to 4 years ago. Walford was the starting quarterback. Basically, since his freshman year, he has been the starting quarterback. And if you look up his numbers for his first 3 years off the top of my head, 30 touchdowns, 35 picks. Awful, atrocious offensive line. They had no running game. They had one of the 3 worst rushing attacks 2 consecutive years in college football, averaging at one point like 2.9 yards per carry. So they had nothing offensively. This is a well-kept secret in college football, that Wake Forest had one of the top 15 pass efficiency offenses in the nation against that schedule in the ACC, against that division. And the defensive talent in that division from Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina State in particular. And also Wake Forest played, I don't remember off the top of my head in the other division, but they didn't play anybody at a conference that was that good. But then they took on, of course, Texas A&M in the Belk Bowl, and that's when they really showcased the passing game. Now, John Wolford is gone, but I mentioned his 30 to 35 TD to pick ratio his first 3 years as a senior is 29-6. That's how good Wake Forest has become on offense. So will they take a step back? Yes, they lose Wolford. They lose one of their other top wide receivers, I believe, Scotty. Can't think of his last name, Scotty Williams. And, but otherwise, Matt Coburn at running back is back. The other receivers are back. Kendall Hinton has playing experience at quarterback, pretty extensive playing experience, although he's a different type quarterback than Wolford, as he usually takes off with it. So they're going to have a different style of offense. But I expect Wake Forest to hang tight as a decent program, a top 40 type program coming off that 8-5 campaign last season. So I'm right there with you, Ryan. What else do we have? So consider this in the Big Ten. We'll stay right there. So what I've done here is I've gone through all the conferences except the Big 12, because the Big 12 plays everyone. So that's a fair schedule. I was just curious what the difference in scheduling is, and I will cut some videos to post this on the big board so you can see. So, for example, in the Big Ten West, Nebraska, as I mentioned, plays Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State out of the East. Those three teams went 20-7. And actually, those three teams were better than that because Michigan only lost to the really good teams in the Big Ten East. So compare what Nebraska has to play in Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State versus Iowa. Iowa plays Penn State, Indiana, and Maryland. They get one of three difficult games. Those three teams in the Big Ten last year went 11-16. Consider this. Michigan in the Big Ten East. The three teams that they face out of the Big Ten Western Division, Nebraska, Northwestern, and Wisconsin, went 19-8 last year, as opposed to Maryland. Maryland's got Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois out of the Western Division. Those three teams went 6-21 in the Big Ten. Just consider, and you wouldn't expect Michigan to be competing with Maryland, but you would consider that, for example, Rutgers and Maryland might be battling for a bowl spot. There might be a bowl position there for them. And for Rutgers, the three teams that they play in the Big Ten Western Division were 10 games better than the three teams Maryland will face out of the Western Division of the Big Ten. By the way, the Eastern Division won 34 of the 63 games played last year, 34-29 for the East. That does not count the championship game in the West, went 29-34. Darnell chimes in with, you think FAU DeAndre Johnson will start at quarterback this year? Boy, when it comes to the group of five, I watch the Bull play. I have some group of five contributors on. I have to claim ignorance on that one with FAU. This is where I need you guys as the voice of college football. The voice, my voice, your voice, my media contributor's voice. You chime in on FAU and let me know what's going on there. Scotty Washington. I believe I did call him Scotty Washington, correct? I don't think I missed that. But he is coming back from, I'm thinking of Cam Serenay's the tight end. They do have a wide receiver who contributed heavily last year, Ryan, who is not coming back. But yes, in addition to that, Cam Serenay, who has been one of the best tight ends in the nation, not just the ACC, is gone. Matthew, how many years of leniency do you think Jimbo Fisher has before A&M fans get anxious? I would think year 3. So consider Texas A&M fans, the smart ones, the ones who are patient and knowledgeable and understand the landscape of the SEC Western Division, and also take into consideration that Jimbo Fisher is not building a program. Kevin Sumlin, despite his issues on the field and completing the work on the field, especially in November, built a good program there, continued what had been forged there, and going 8-5, 8-5, 8-5, and 8-5 forever. And of course, the expectations are much higher for Jimbo Fisher, and they should be in terms of the money that they're paying him. I say year 3. So we've got Clemson and Alabama to deal with in just the first month of the season, just the first 4 games. So Texas A&M at best, you would think, is going to go 2-2 to start. They are not winning big in 2018. So that's 1 year out of the books. And if they go 8-4, win a bowl game, go 9-4, that's at least, it may not mean much, but for the storyline, the narrative, what the fans want to see, they can at least see 8-5, 9-4, win a bowl game. Okay, we're improving. Jimbo's done something. And the smart fans will say, okay, and we tacked on Clemson on the schedule. We've not seen the likes of Clemson. It's been Lamar and Rice and all these schools, and we finally scheduled a home and home with a decent team in UCLA, but we beat them 1 out of 2 and should have won the other one. So I would say year 3. I would expect if Jimbo Fisher is going to be a success at Texas A&M, he's going to go 9-4 this season. But let's say he goes 7-6 or 8-5. It's not going to be the end of the world. He can't be judged completely unless he goes 4-8 this season on year one. The next season, 2019, okay, he's got one rotation of players from the recruiting classes into the fold. And then, well, he basically has not two full cycles of classes, but two classes that he signed in 2019. So that is where we need to see some marked improvement. He needs to, in 2019, knock off an LSU. That's something Texas A&M has not done since they joined the SEC, is even beat LSU, and LSU has been, by their standards, down. Think about that. 2012, Johnny Manziel. 2013, Johnny Manziel could not beat LSU. And so this is 2012 through 17. That's 6 seasons of playing LSU, and Texas A&M is 0-6. So hold your ground, of course, against Arkansas and Ole Miss. Beat Mississippi State. Lose to Auburn and Alabama. Beat LSU. That will show that this is a different deal. This is a guy that can beat an upper echelon, very talented team. That could be a key game for Jimbo Fisher in showing that this is a different program. We've broken through. No, we're not yet ready to chase Alabama, but we're ready. We're progressing. We can beat somebody good. Texas A&M hasn't beaten a really, really good team since Johnny Manziel left. All right. So I would guess let's go 8-4 this year for Jimbo Fisher should be the target. Then let's say they up it to 9-3, and then 2020 could be the breakthrough. So earlier in the night, when I announced the live stream, I threw it out to my media contributors and said, hey, if anybody wants to jump on and talk some college football, jump on in. And I've got the best media contributors in the business, including Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football. Kevin, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, Mark. How are you?
Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I gotcha.
Okay.
What's going on tonight?
The weather is lousy. That's about it. We've had like all 4 seasons in one day. Rain, snow, thunderstorms, sleet, thunder, sleet. It's been nuts here, but anyway.
Kevin, I know you like to be classified in the Midwest, but during the winter you kind of are, and that's the Midwest. You're kind of you're southern Midwest. I know you're in the South. You're south of the Mason-Dixon line, but you get some of that Midwestern kind of weather.
Yeah, you're right. And like I said, we've had in the western part of the state it was 70 degrees today. In the northern part of the state they had like 6 inches of snow. So, but anyway, but yeah.
Kevin, I'll let you know
from the NCAA. So,
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're probably watching some basketball tonight, and I saw the Loyola Chicago score. It's fun to see an 11 seed break the party up and make it to the Final Four.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's obviously been the feel good story of this this whole tournament. Every time I see there's been a sign, I get cracked up because the Blues Brothers is one of my favorite all time movies, and they have a picture of Sister Jean in the middle and Jake and Elwood on either side, and it says we're on a mission from God, and it just like I said, every time I see it, it cracks me up. So
beautiful.
But good. Like I said, Kentucky fans pretty disappointed. They laid a giant egg on Thursday. No other way to describe it. But there's no guarantee that Loyola wouldn't have played this well against them as they did against Kansas State tonight.
Yeah, everybody thought that the bracket opened up for Kentucky, and then the upsets just continued. And it's so funny. We watch so many upsets, especially in this tournament. And then the analysis, even from the guys that know, are like, well, the brackets open up and Kentucky's got its way to the Final Four. Well, we didn't we just see all those other upsets? What guarantees that they're not going to continue?
And yeah, you're exactly right. I think the Midwest is the only region that's held true to form with Duke and Kansas tomorrow. So we'll see what happens. That should be a well of a game. We'll see what happens. I guess at this point I'm rooting for Villanova because I could win some money in office pool if Villanova won it. I think I come in third or something. So
Very nice.
so if no other reason to root for another group of Wildcats, why not, right?
That's
So
always the motivation this time of year once your team gets knocked out. It's some people have conference allegiances, and then other people just want to win a couple bucks. And I've got no
right.
fault with either.
Yeah.
Kevin, I'll let you know what we've kicked around thus far. And we've got a number of people on the line with us and a number of people in the chat. I don't know if you can see the chat. Some of the recent comments have been we've got our Iowa fan, Ricky. He's ready to see Iowa play. That we've got a comment about Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. I don't know if you're aware, they've got a home and home series with Clemson, and therefore they've got to play Clemson and Alabama the first month. So people need to be patient with Jimbo Fisher, understanding they're probably going to be 2-2 out of the gate with two of the best teams in college football in that September slate. Maryland could be a surprise team. I think it's just the one big recruiting class, so I don't think they're going to scare anyone in the Big Ten East. Maybe review for us real quickly, because I've released some of the segments, but not the entire conversation. But we talked just a few months ago about Kentucky football, which involves a quarterback battle, which involves obviously a battle with a number of teams in the SEC Eastern Division that could be very intriguing this year.
Yeah, like I said, you and I talked about the quarterback battle. We touched on the weather. The weather at UK was supposed to have their first scrimmage today, and it pretty much got canned, for lack of a better term. They had to do like a controlled scrimmage inside because of the weather. Still kind of the same situation. You've got Terry Wilson, Gunnar Hoke, and then also Danny Clark. Three guys who are all vying for that starting quarterback job. I don't know that it's going to get settled, in the spring. It may go all the way up to, September 1st, that first game of the season. I think from, just from what I've heard and, just from his familiarity with the program, I think Hoke is probably a little bit ahead of everybody else right now. But I know that Terry Wilson stayed here over spring break. UK just had spring break, I think, last week. And, he stayed here to work out and work on his game. And that's going to be the biggest, factor, the biggest talking thing probably for, the Kentucky football team going from now through September. The spring game is April 13th. And, we may have a better idea, how things go after that. But that's going to be the number one thing if you're talking about Kentucky football between now and September is going to be who's going to be the quarterback.
And we've got, as usual, a number of quarterback battles, and they take center stage during the spring for most fan bases. But Kentucky with a unique situation in which nobody has thrown a pass at this level. And so they're going to have a completely inexperienced quarterback, most likely. Is that correct? Playing in 2018.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, Gunnar Hoke has been the standout of the spring games the last 2 years, but has never thrown a pass in a live game. Terry Wilson, went to Oregon, never threw a pass, redshirted, never played in a game there, played at junior college. And then, Danny Clark, who's the number 3 guy right now, he's a redshirt freshman. So, yeah, it's going to be, very unique. And there may be a lot of just handing off to Benny Snell at the beginning of the season, which is probably not, may not be the worst idea anyway. But yeah, you're exactly right. Whoever ends up as a starter will have not thrown a pass in a game, in an actual college game.
Kevin, I think the SEC Eastern Division is tightly bunched. However, I would say that Georgia reigns supreme with more of a gap between them and number 2 than any other division in college football, just the way things stand and look right now. Of course, things change very quickly, and sometimes we're reminded of that. I'll get in a conversation with somebody, and it's like, wow, that just happened 2 years ago, and things have totally flipped. But as things stand right now, Georgia appears to be by far the best team with the best roster. And obviously, they just tacked on another just amazing recruiting class. But after that, I think South Carolina's got the best team. I do think that in the long run, that Florida has the best chance of making a leap with Dan Mullen. Tennessee obviously has a ton of work to do, but Jeremy Pruitt had a nice recruiting class. Vandy's always going to be very challenged to do anything. Mizzou broke out with a nice season, surprisingly, and 7-5, lost the bowl game, but still won 7 games and has a very experienced, talented quarterback back in Drew Lock. But South Carolina, I think, they intrigue me because they have really maximized their resources and played extremely well. The metrics have said that they're not an outstanding football team, but they've just found ways to win, and they did that against Michigan in the Outback Bowl, down by 16 points in the second half. So your feelings about the SEC Eastern Division?
I think I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I think one of the things I'm in the process of working on, I may wait till after spring practice is over, kind of doing like a way too early SEC rankings. And I would, obviously you said Georgia is, way up here and everybody else is, fighting for second. I mean, I would probably put South Carolina second right now, and then maybe Florida third, because I just don't see them having that bad of a season 2 years in a row. And then I'd probably have Kentucky, and then either Tennessee or Missouri, and then Vanderbilt. I don't know how much Tennessee's going to improve under Jeremy Pruitt, in this first season, but I think they're obviously going to be better than they were last year. But then I would have Vanderbilt probably, at the bottom. But I agree totally. I think based on what South Carolina did at the end of last season, they were probably the best team not named Georgia in the SEC East, at the end of last season.
So I've got Ryan on here. I can always count on him for doing a bit of a producing job for me, and that's something that you're very accustomed to there in the TV profession there in Kentucky, Kevin. So we've got a top 5 running back list. So what I typically try to do during the off season, and I try not to overpromise, but I would like to knock out and have in the past a top 10 national position breakdown, position by position, in top 5 in each conference. So Ryan's top 5 running backs in the SEC include your guy. So we've got DeAndre Swift from Georgia at number 1, Benny Snell, Kentucky, number 2, Damian Harris from Bama at number 3. Number 4 is Jordan Scarlett, of course, who had some legal problems, and he's back with Florida. And number 5, Demaria Crockett from Mizzou. So your guy Benny Snell there at number 2, according to Ryan.
I think that's a pretty good list. I don't, be totally unbiased or biased. You can make a case for Benny Snell being number 1, but I have no problem, no problem with anybody on that list. I don't know that I would even change, any of the positions there. But Benny needs, I think it's 1,400 yards this season to become the all-time leading rusher at Kentucky. He'd pass Sonny Collins, and I think a lot of people expect that this would probably be, barring an injury or something unforeseen, this probably his last year. Would totally expect him to declare for the draft, next season. But yeah, that's a really good list. I can't argue with anybody on there in any of the places.
We've got Kevin McGuffey on the line from Last Word on College Football. One of my main sources for some tremendous media contributions from the likes of, in the past, Donald King, and currently from Mike LaValle and Kevin McGuffey. Also, Tony Siracusa, who jumps on the line and provides tremendous insight into UCLA football, one of the more intriguing programs in the country. And I threw that out as a question as well, or a topic earlier, Kevin. UCLA intrigues me because it just seems like a sleeping giant to me. Like, what kid would not want to go to Southern California and play college football? And UCLA has all the money and resources you would think to be able to make it happen, but they're never that good. So they intrigue me. This particular season, Texas intrigues me because Tom Herman has 2 recruiting classes under his belt, the number 3 class this year. Will they have much of an impact? Probably not a huge impact this season, but Texas played within a field goal in overtime of Oklahoma State. They held Baker Mayfield under 30 points. They played really tough in the Big 12. Then they just housed Mizzou in the Texas Bowl. I think they could challenge in the Big 12. In the SEC, LSU intrigues me because you just got to think that they're going to get off the mat at some point and find that quarterback, because everything else is in place for the most part. Although they've got to replace DJ Chark at wide receiver, Darius Geis at running back, two of the better playmakers for them. And Chark really showed up at the NFL Combine. He was outstanding. And again, I'm intrigued to see if South Carolina continues their ascent. I'm intrigued to see if Florida can take off and Dan Mullen's that good to reverse them from 4-7. You know, they've got talent on the roster to like an 8-4 campaign. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know who else intrigues you in particular.
Well, I mean, all of those schools do. I mean, I was a big fan of Tom Herman's when he was at Houston. I really, I really enjoyed watching them play. I mean, staying in the state of Texas, I'm going to be, Texas A&M. I'm gonna be really interested to see what happens, with Jimbo, how things progress this year. It may not be this year. It could be in a couple years. I'm kind of excited. Kentucky, travels to College Station for an away game this year. It'll be the first time, I think, since the 1950s they played, at Texas A&M. That, that's another school that I'm intrigued about. Like I said, LSU, it's seemingly every year LSU is like maybe one player away, like whether it's quarterback or it's, like as you said, having to replace, Geis as well. It's like
it's quarterback, Kevin. It's quarterback.
Yeah, sorry, I zoned out on you there for a second.
No, I'm just saying, you didn't zone out. I'm just saying you could pretty much stop right there. LSU needs a quarterback. They need to find that guy. I don't know if they don't find the guy or they don't develop the guy. I can't imagine that they've missed on quarterbacks for the last 10 years. Except for Zach Mettenberger. He could play.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It seems like, these guys, I think that, they're always seem to be highly recruited, up on the charts. But yeah, it's like they get to LSU and they don't progress. It's like, what are they, what are they doing? But yeah, that's another team that, like I said, is interesting to me. As you said, South Carolina, that's interesting. As South Carolina has been progressing, but Kentucky has beaten South Carolina 4 years in a row now, which is, other than Vanderbilt, the last time Kentucky did that, I think, was in the in the late 40s, early 50s, when Bear Bryant was here, when they beat Florida, 4 years in a row. So as good as South Carolina's been, Kentucky has seemed to have their number this year, the last few years, and I'll be very interested to see if that continues this year. And another team you mentioned earlier is Missouri. They got off to such a horrible start and then, turned it on at the end of the season before getting blown out, in the Texas Bowl. I'm be curious to see what happens, with Drew Lock returning and, that cast of characters, if they continue the momentum that they had from the end of 2017 going into this season. And also, UCLA, like I said, that's another school, almost comparing it to Kentucky, but it's like, it just seems like every year they could be poised to break out, 7-win, 8-win, 9-win, 10-win seasons. And for whatever reason, it never happens. Now, Tony could probably, expand on that a lot more than me, but that's another school that, everything that's going on in the off season with coaching and, I'm going to be, interested to see what they do this year as well.
Ricky's on the chat. He's an Iowa fan, but he has caught on to the SEC Eastern Division theme here with the Mizzou comment, saying basically that Mizzou, for a long time, they wanted to join the Big Ten. They were turned down basically because the facilities were not sufficient enough to join the Big Ten. Of course, they then joined the SEC, and it's been an extremely interesting ride, Kevin, from Mizzou since they joined the SEC. So my initial thought in 2012 that Texas A&M and Mizzou are joining the SEC. These teams will not be able to compete in the SEC. Sure, they'll win games. They'll not be downtrodden and stomped on. They have good, solid football programs, but those 9 and 10 win Missouri teams are not going to be able to do that in the SEC. Well, they come into the SEC. We'll put Texas A&M to the side looking at Mizzou, and that first season was brutal. They were bad, and they got trounced from week 1 against Georgia. I remember their SEC opener at home against Georgia, and Jarvis Jones and company just trampled them. And they had a bad season. But Gary Pinkel was a really good football coach, and for the next 2 years, they won the SEC Eastern Division. Now, I know Georgia was down, and Florida was down, and Tennessee was down, and but you can only make so many excuses. They won the SEC East twice. They went 7-1 both seasons in the SEC. And then all of a sudden, Pinkel leaves. He has health issues. They drop off as expected because they have probably the biggest challenge recruiting than any school in the SEC because they're removed from that southern footprint of recruiting. So they've got to go to Texas. They've got to go to Oklahoma. They don't have much in state to recruit to Missouri. But then they jump back just when I thought, man, this Vandy has passed them by. They were awful 2 years ago. They bounce back and have a nice season, beat some decent teams, and win 7.
Yeah, you're right. Of course, the interesting fact about Missouri is I think they didn't end up beating a team with a winning record last season. So, but but still that 6-game winning streak, they were throwing up 40, 50 points a game. And like I said, Gary Pinkel, I always thought was a really, was a really, really great coach. And I wondered, as you said, when Missouri, when Missouri joined the SEC, I was like, okay, well, how is this gonna work? Moving conferences. I thought Texas A&M honestly would come right in and, not necessarily knock off Alabama, but I thought they would be, right there, that 10, 11 wins, every season. But yeah, like I said, Missouri, they came in just like a house of fire those first couple of years, and now they've dropped off. And as I said, as we talked about earlier, I'll be interested to see how they do in 2018 if they continue that momentum, that they picked up from the end of last season.
As Ryan mentions, LSU continues to struggle to develop a quarterback. Brandon Harris, we can go on down the line. Some of the more recent quarterbacks, the kid Anthony Jennings never turned out to be very good. Brandon Harris actually went to North Carolina and continued his poor play there. So maybe he just didn't turn out to be the player that he was supposed to be. He's an athlete who never caught on to the quarterback position. We were talking also, somebody mentioned Tennessee. Ryan jumps in with the Vols being down since 2007. Butch Jones, things happen and change, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, so quickly in college football, where Butch Jones takes over a downtrodden football program off of the Derek Dooley era and the 1 year of Lane Kiffin, and pulls it all together, starts recruiting in the top 5 to 15 in the nation, pulls in some really good recruiting classes, had that 1 year. He had the 2 9-4 seasons, but the 1 year they lost to Alabama in the final minutes. They lost to Oklahoma in overtime. They lost to Arkansas they lost to Florida on a complete fluke on a 4th and 16 play. They were like that close to being like elite, like challenging for the college football playoff. And then, yeah, they unraveled from there. And of course, Butch Jones just could not win those close games. And then that seemed to be the window where he had his best talent maturing under Joshua Dobbs at quarterback. And it all unraveled last season, of course, with an 0-8 season. And Jeremy Pruitt's got the pieces to pick up.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And like I said, but even as bad as, from the Kentucky standpoint, even as bad as, Tennessee, by their standards have been, until last season, Kentucky still haven't been able to beat them. And it's still, I think it's 3 times since 1984 now. One of those times Kentucky played a 3rd-string wide receiver as quarterback. But like I said, Tennessee is another team, like I said, with Pruitt and it seems like whenever Saban's assistants go to another school, they do, they end up doing really well. And I don't expect Tennessee to be at, certainly don't expect them to go 0-8, and I sure don't think they're going to be at the bottom of the conference. They may be near, like I said, I think I might have them like 5th in the preseason, but I don't think they're going to be there for long. I think in a couple of years they're going to be back to, you may have the three-headed monster again of, Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida all being good and all fighting for that SEC East, and then you'll have Kentucky, South Carolina, Vandy, Missouri, those guys, fighting for 4th. And then occasionally you may get, and that's not to say that Kentucky couldn't, roll off and 8-4 or 9-3, which, I think they do have the schedule they could do that this year. But we'll see. You know, we'll see what happens. Like I said, we'll see what happens with the quarterback. And but going back to your point, yeah, I don't think I like I said, I see eventually those three, you know, being back. Not, you know, what they would consider the golden era, I guess. You know, in the '90s, where you had all three of those schools who were all good and they were all fighting for the championship every year. Then everybody else is like, you know, maybe just a notch below them. But we'll see what happens once we get to the fall.
Well, that's exactly what my default thinking about the SEC Eastern Division is. If anybody mentions the SEC East, I automatically think Georgia, Tennessee, Florida. And then everybody else doesn't matter. Well, that's not the case right now, of course. South Carolina is decent, and Georgia owns the division, and we'll see about everybody else. I do think South Carolina is going to continue to be good. I think they've shown us enough the last 2 years, and winning 9 games last year. Liberty City Box. I botched his handle there. Liberty City Boy. He wants us to talk about the Miami quarterback situation. Kevin, we've got that covered. Liberty City, please check out my segment. I've had multiple segments talking about the Miami football situation at quarterback with Cam Underwood from State of the U and some other contributors. So we have talked it to death. Jaron Williams is a stud. Kosi Perry is a redshirt freshman who's been there, of course, 1 year. But no, they didn't. They did redshirt him. And, of course, Malik Rozier threw 26 touchdowns, but let down the fans during a 3-game losing streak late and probably is going to lose his job. So please check out those segments.
Yeah. And Kentucky fans don't want to talk about Jaron Williams, but that
absolutely. Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think he's, you know, I will be interested to see how that quarterback situation plays out down there. I mean, you know, Jaron Williams is obviously a really good player, and Kentucky thought they had a great one in Williams, but there was always that, okay, he's going to end up going somewhere else. He's going to end up going somewhere else, and then, you know, finally he did pull the proverbial trigger and you know, and moved on. But I said I could see him playing down there and doing a really, really good job. I mean, all the, you know, the videos and stuff I saw of him, I was really impressed with Williams.
Yeah, Ryan's mentioning here, if anyone has questions about Miami, please just look over the channel. I have so much Miami material.
Yeah, you've got Miami. Yeah, you got a lot of stuff about Miami. So
people like Miami. People have found me that like Miami football. If it was Illinois, then I'd pursue more Illinois. Whoever it is, I will try to get to as much as possible. But of course, I'm going to address the fan bases that seem to watch. I'm going to hit you with something here, Kevin. That bothers me about scheduling in college football. So I have an issue with the non-conference scheduling, but I'll table that for right now. I'm looking at non-division scheduling. So, of course, as you well know, and everybody that's watching, you're college football junkies. I don't have to explain this to you, but just to set the stage, every team, if we're talking SEC, Big Ten, and ACC in particular, also the Pac-12, you play everyone in your division. And then with the ACC and the SEC only playing 8 games conference in a 14-team league, you only play 2 of the other 7 teams. The 7 teams in the other division, you only play 2. Well, in the ACC and the SEC, you have 1 designated rival for the other division, and most of those make sense, but some do not because they just had to match up the other teams. And then you play the other game just rotates. So you play those other teams, you only play them once out of every 6 years. So what ends up happening, Kevin, is that we have schedules that are uneven, that aren't fair. So consider this. Let's say Tennessee was, let's throw out our perception of how good these teams are going to be. Let's just take it on face value that everybody's the same and they should have a even playing field to compete for the division championship. The 2 teams that Tennessee has to play out of division, of course, Alabama and Auburn. Those 2 teams last year in the SEC went 14-2. Vanderbilt plays Ole Miss and Arkansas. Those 2 teams went 4-12. Now, is that fair for a team to play a 14-2 non-division schedule and another team to play a 4-12 non-division schedule? I would not schedule like that. I don't think it's fair.
No, it's really not. But, you know, you can't I don't think you can, at least in Tennessee's case, I don't think you can break up, the Tennessee Alabama rivalry. But it's not. When you look at it that way, it's not fair. Like in Kentucky's case this year, they play. Mississippi State is Kentucky's permanent team from the SEC West, and they play Texas A&M this year. So, and this will be, like I said, the first time that Kentucky's played them in 50 years. No, it's really not, and it's and it you never know. You could catch somebody when they're having a great season, or or the other way around, somebody's having a really bad season. But yeah, no, when you look at it like that, no, it's really not fair. But like I said, you don't want to. At least in Tennessee's case, I don't think you want to end the break up the that rivalry. But yeah, you would think that if you're going to have to play Alabama, maybe you should. And no offense to Arkansas or Ole Miss, but maybe you should combo that with like one of those teams.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I would do. I would not break up the rivalries. What I would do this is what I would do. Alabama, Tennessee have a rivalry cross division. Georgia, Auburn have a rivalry, and LSU, Florida have a rivalry. Those are the three legitimate rivalries. The other teams don't have rivalries. They just matched them up. So I would get rid of them. I would keep those other games, and then I would do my best to, and it can be done, I've done it, match up another team that's going to get you close to a 500 schedule out of the division. So if you've got to play Alabama 7-1, then you go try to find a 1-7 team. And you match them up as close as you possibly can. And then you get near a 500 schedule out of division for everybody. Now, see, Matthew has jumped on something, and I knew this was going to happen. People are taking into consideration how good the teams are. It shouldn't matter how good the teams are. They should play even schedules. We shouldn't say, well, Georgia's really good, so it doesn't matter that they play the best teams over here. Or Vandy, poor Vandy, they should play just Ole Miss and Arkansas because they're not very good, so they shouldn't have to play a tough schedule. No, even the schedules out and let it be determined on the field who the best teams are. And I know you can't anticipate how good the teams are going to be this year, but you can base it on last year's standings and relatively as closely as possible make it even scheduling.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think, let's see, last year, 2 years ago, Kentucky played Alabama or played Auburn, and then 3 years ago played Alabama. So, but yeah, like I said, with Mississippi State, no, I think I see nothing wrong with that. And I understand the point that you're not going to know, you're basing it on last year's schedules. And, somebody, as you said, could, be one in, like Tennessee was 0-8 last year. They may be, 4-4, 5-3, but you just don't know. Yeah, but yeah, I see the point, but yeah, no, I think you're right. I think they ought to try to, find a way to. I don't know how they do those schedules, but I know Kentucky's other game next year is Arkansas, and then I don't remember about 2020, but I think 2021 they have Alabama again. So 2020 maybe LSU. I'm not sure. I'd have to look up the website. The FBS schedules website that does such a great job keeping updated on schedules. But yeah, like I said, no, I don't see a problem with that. Wouldn't see a problem with that at all. Try to balance it out to where, like, say like Ole Miss had to play, Georgia and South Carolina next year, then maybe, you bump one of those and you put, a Vandy, or, even, Kentucky played Ole Miss last year, but maybe you put, maybe that's what you do, something like that. I don't see a problem with that, but I don't know if that would ever happen. And I don't think, I don't think the SEC is ever going to go to a 9-game schedule either. So.
Yeah, so I'm going to play along with the people that aren't quite taking this in, and they're looking again at how good the teams are and saying you can't compare Vandy and Tennessee because Tennessee has higher expectations than Vandy. That shouldn't matter. But let's go to the ACC. Wouldn't you expect, Kevin, that Florida State and North Carolina State should be vying for the division championship? Should be good teams that are roughly on the same level. Well, look at this. Florida State out of division plays Miami and Virginia Tech, who last year went 12-4 in the conference. North Carolina State plays North Carolina and Virginia. They went 4-12 in the conference. Now, if that's not a decided advantage for North Carolina State.
Yeah, no, you're right. It really is. And like I said, it seems, it seems to be that way in like in all the major conferences. Like I said, I don't know how I don't know how you try to fix that. I mean, as you said, that there's a way to try to balance, try to balance it out. Of course, from Kentucky standpoint, they play Louisville every year, of course, which is an ACC school. And they said, I think Coach Stoops and Mitch Barnhart, the athletic director, have said that, on numerous occasions, if the SEC went to a 9-game schedule, they'd have to drop the series with Louisville because they want to have, you want to have those 3 games in there that you think you can win every year, to try to get to those 6 wins and try to get to that bowl game, which would be, a very disappointing thing for, the state of Kentucky because, it's pretty, obviously a heated rivalry. So.
Well, Kevin, when it comes to non-conference scheduling, this is my plan. What I would do there is everyone would have to play a 9-game conference schedule. So everyone would have 3 games out of conference. I would take the scheduling completely out of the hands of the schools. And except for 1 game, I would say you can go schedule 1 game, go schedule an FCS, a group of 5, do whatever you want to, schedule that 1 game. The other 2 games, like my division situation, we're going to take the records from last year and we're going to hand you a 2-game non-conference schedule of 2 teams that have a composite 500 schedule from the year before. So I'm going to even out the scheduling so we have comparable scheduling across the country.
Like I said, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. But I don't know how many coaches and schools would take you up on that. But as as an example for Kentucky, they're not, other than Louisville, they play Murray State, who's an FCS school, and then they play Central Michigan and Middle Tennessee this year. So Middle Tennessee is a pretty, I think both of those schools actually went to bowl games last year, so they're not. They're not horrible. They're not horrible teams, but they're teams Kentucky should beat.
So, Kevin, every time I introduce the topic and I explain that, people don't listen to me, and the thing they jump to, the exercise is that, oh yeah, we should do it like that. Alabama, you need to go play Ohio State, and LSU, you're going to go play Michigan, and Georgia, you're going to go play Clemson, and you have to play teams at your seated on the same line with in the other conferences. And I'm like, no. I'm not making Alabama's schedule more difficult than Vanderbilt's schedule. I am making them equitable. I don't believe in the NFL system, and I understand what the NFL is trying to do. They're trying to create parity. And it's difficult to do because most teams in the NFL are good. So everybody plays a tough schedule. They can weight the field one way or the other slightly. In college football, we could weight it a ton, of course, in the non-conference scheduling, but I want it to be equitable. That's what I would do.
Yeah, like I said, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. And as you said, using the NFL as an example, how many times you see it at least once, probably every year, where somebody who finishes last the year before gets to play that last place schedule, and then all of a sudden, are 10-6, 11-5. It happens almost every year. Now, if you were, trying to schedule like, the SEC and the Big Ten, I'm sure Kentucky would love to have another shot at Northwestern after that bowl game last year. I think they would be pretty even. And then like, the ACC, maybe in North Carolina State, somewhere, maybe even Duke, somewhere on that level. I don't know who you would take out of the Big 12 or the Pac-12, but if you want to try to do something like that, I mean, I think it would make games more, make things more interesting, because, in basketball, using Kentucky as an example, attendance was down a little bit this year than usual, and a lot of it had to do with the non-conference schedule because, Coach Cal, he wants to play these bigger schools, but, they never want to do a home and home. And so you're left with, playing these lower level schools that nobody's really interested in. I think it would help, drum up, a game against, at Kroger Field against, say, a North Carolina or a Northwestern would certainly, I think, drum up more interest than, say, Central Michigan, kind of thing. So, I mean, I think it would be, not that college football has trouble with attendance. I think that's, I think they seem to be a lot of ways, economy proof, it seems like. But
well, I think college football is as popular, if not more popular, than it's ever been, but the attendance is actually down. I read an article recently that attendance has declined something like 12 of the last 14 years. So it keeps slipping and slipping and slipping. And there's a number of factors into play. People want to stay home and watch several games. They don't want to fight the traffic. The ticket prices are going up, or whatever the case might be. But the popularity of the sport, the TV numbers are huge and they're growing. I do want to address two comments. One, Ryan made that plays along with your analysis of Kentucky's schedule. So he mentions that if Georgia, in particular, if the SEC went to a 9-game conference season, then Georgia would have to drop the Georgia Tech game. I don't necessarily see that. So let's say Georgia had 3 non-conference games, and we said, Georgia, you go schedule Appalachian State or an FCS or whoever you want to play, and then we'll schedule 2 non-conference games for you, and we'll make one Georgia Tech always. And so in my scheduling formula, I keep the rivalries, but Georgia plays Georgia Tech, and let's say Georgia Tech went 6-6 last year. I just have to go find another 6-6 team for Georgia to play. Or if Georgia Tech went 8-4, I'm going to go try to find a 4-8 team to match up to play Georgia, if you follow my scheduling system.
Yeah, no, I know what you're I know what you're trying to get at. Like I said, I don't see anything wrong with it. I think it would probably help. And like I said, maybe that's part of the reason about, the attendance, sometimes too, is that people, aren't as excited to see, Kentucky play Murray State as they would be, not that they're going to schedule Ohio State, but, somebody, someone similar. As you said, you find somebody who was 7-5 out of the ACC. I wouldn't, Kentucky might want to play. You mentioned Georgia Tech after the Taxslayer Bowl a couple years ago. I think Kentucky might like to have another crack at Georgia Tech, but that's a story for another time. But no, like I said, I think what you got is, I think it would be a really interesting idea. I just don't know that, people would ever go for it.
So again, Kevin, we've got Ricky on the line from Iowa, and I told him to brace himself because I'm going to tear into Iowa. This is the issue I have with Iowa in particular. If I'm an Iowa football fan, I have no expectation or no anticipation, excitement to see a schedule release, or that Iowa's going to go schedule a series with Texas or Oklahoma State or some regional type games for the future, because this is what Iowa does. Because the Big Ten now plays 9 conference games, and Iowa even did this before when they had an 8-game season, they only want to play 1 Power 5 game, and they always play Iowa State. So that's their game. So I already know who they're going to play in the Power 5, and it's Iowa State. Does that really excite me? Yes, it's a great rivalry, and it should be played. But that's Iowa's game. So I know if I look through the next 5 years, I'm not going to see Iowa, NC State. I'm not going to see Iowa, Oklahoma State, or TCU. It's a boring schedule, and it's never going to change, and it's always been that.
Yeah, no, you're right. And like I said, Kentucky, you can go back many years ago. Kentucky used to play like all these teams. My dad and I had season tickets for years and years and years. And, there was one year they played South Carolina when George Rogers was there. They played, they scheduled all these ridiculous teams that, quite frankly, they had no chance of winning. But like I said, Kentucky was the same example, because, Louisville's going to be on the schedule every year, and then there's going to be basically three other games that they know they can win, or they think they can win. So like I said, I see why the schools do it, and I know why the schools do it, because they're trying to get that 6 wins. But it doesn't always make for interesting football or exciting football, I guess. I mean, if you live in Iowa State is obviously a huge game, because our chief meteorologist at our TV station, Bill Meck's an Iowa State graduate, and so that 1 week, every year, it's like, that's all you hear about is Iowa State. And then the other 11 weeks out of the year, you never hear anything about Iowa State. So,
yeah, it was actually a game that I tuned into and watched the second half and overtime last year, and it was a 44-41 game, very exciting game. And of course, we know Iowa State beat TCU and Oklahoma. They beat the two best teams in the conference last year. Then they kind of dwindled down the stretch, but they jumped up and beat the Giants. But typically, Iowa State is awful, one of the worst Power 5 teams, and they are always on Iowa's schedule. And I get it. Go ahead and schedule that game. Keep the rivalry going, but schedule somebody else. Oklahoma, Arizona State, somebody. And with the Kentucky situation, Kevin, again, explain to me why they would have to drop Louisville.
Well, the thought is they want to keep at least 3 games on their schedule every year that they think they can win in order to try to get to the 6 wins and get to a bowl game. So I know, but that is what I've been told, or what I have heard, is that's why, like, this year they have Murray State, Middle Tennessee, and Central Michigan. Last year was Eastern Michigan, and I can't remember the other 2 teams. That's how exciting it was, right? But that's the way it's always been explained, is that you want to keep those three teams. You at least have 3 games on your schedule that you can win, and that way you try to win 3 games. If you win 3 games in your conference, then you've got your 6 wins and you've got your bowl game. So, but that's what they said. That whether that actually came to pass, because years ago, Kentucky, when the SEC played a 7-game schedule, Kentucky had a series with Indiana that they played every year, and then when the SEC went to 8 games, they dropped that series for much the same reason. Like, okay, we need schedule these because we already have a rivalry series with Louisville, which that started, I think, back in 1994. Like, when that series started, they dropped the Indiana series. So, but right now I think Kentucky and Indiana would probably be a pretty good matchup in football.
Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football joining us on our live stream tonight, Saturday night, 9:00 Eastern time. Thanks for taking a break from hoops to check us out on the college football coverage, and we appreciate Kevin jumping on board with us. So, Kevin, Louisville went 8-4 last year. So, under my system, we've got a number of options here for you for next season. You just keep the Louisville game. You've got Rutgers, you've got Syracuse, Maryland, Nebraska. All those teams went 4-8. We could match up Louisville or Kentucky with a number of teams that went 4-8 to balance out my schedule formula. And people don't think it can be done, but I've done it top to bottom. And of course, it's not going to work the first season because we're taking teams with 8-game seasons and 9-game conference seasons. But once we would do it, go through the cycle once, you can match up everyone and have a 500 non-conference schedule against the Power 5.
Yeah, no, you mentioned Nebraska. I think a Kentucky-Nebraska football game would be pretty interesting just from the name. Obviously, Nebraska is not what they've been in the past, but still, that name recognition is like, ooh, we're playing Nebraska. This might be, kind of exciting. And like I said, it is it. I see no flaws in your plan. I just don't know that you could ever get everybody on the same page to do that. But a game against Syracuse would be interesting. Syracuse has always been a kind of a decent name, a good name in football. They have their good years and they've struggled. And then like I said, Rutgers, Kentucky and Rutgers, like I said, would be an interesting. All of those to me would be interesting matchups and would be more interesting than what they are currently playing. But like I said, at the end of the day, it seems to be about the games that you can win, and that's why you schedule them. So
yeah, you've got a tier of teams like Kentucky in every conference that know that they're going to struggle to possibly get to 6 wins, but they know that they've got a good, solid football program, and they have aspirations of getting to a bowl game for the money payoff, the prestige, for a number of reasons. It just looks good to get to a bowl game, and the extra practices for the coach and for the players. And they know that it may be a math sequence of 3 and 5 in the conference and then we get to 3-1 outside of the conference, and we can get to postseason play. And there are some ugly 2-6 conference teams out there that get the 4 straight sweep because of a light schedule. North Carolina State's done that a number of times before they got a little bit better the last few years, where they had the 2-6 ACC team that went 4 straight against the likes of Citadel and Western Carolina and made it to postseason play at 6-6. We do have one comment on here from, I believe, Ryan concerning Kentucky football, that in addition to Terry Wilson, what do you feel about the latest recruiting class and anybody else that you're excited about?
Yeah, there's, I think the recruiting class they have coming in this year is, Coach Stoops has gotten progressively better every year. I think a couple of the guys may not be the at the name positions, but Darian Wilson, offensive lineman, Marquand Marcall, another offensive lineman who they're talking about moving to the defense because he's willing. He's played some on the defensive line. I think both those guys. Darian Kennard. I said Darian Wilson. I had Terry Wilson on the brain. I think it's somebody who can come in right immediately. 2 guys, tight ends, Brendan Bates and Keaton Upshaw. Right now, the Cats have CJ Conrad, who's coming off an injury, and then their backup tight end, Justin Rigg, got injured in literally the first minutes of spring football, just a total fluke injury. So right now Kentucky's practicing they're having to use offensive linemen to fill in at the tight end positions. Those are 2 guys who I think could come in and play immediately. Like I said, there may not be, but as far as the recruits, I think, it's going to come down to what happens with Terry Wilson. If he comes in, immediately and does what they think he can do, I think he will end up being the starting quarterback come September. But like I said, a lot of those guys, may not necessarily be the glamour positions, but they have a lot of guys who can come in, immediately, I think, and give some help.
All right, Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football helping me out tonight, ensuring that I didn't have to talk for 90 straight minutes. Appreciate it, Kevin. You can join Kevin and the rest of the crew at Last Word on College Football. It's just lastwordoncollegefootball.com. Mike Laval, Tony Siracusa. I mentioned Donald King, who's no longer there, but did a tremendous job helping us out for a number of years here at Mark Rogers TV. And just a great bunch of guys that do a tremendous job there. Lauren Beasley is a tremendous writer as well. I've seen her work on a number of occasions, and she supports us and retweets all the time. So we appreciate Lauren as well. I did want to mention one other thing, Kevin, then I'm going to sign off, and you can jump off at any time. I'm only going to stay on for another minute. But I was running through some college football news before jumping on. I didn't want to miss anything. I find it interesting that Illinois has received a commitment, and we know what those are worth. This could change. But from a 5-star quarterback in Isaiah Williams. And if that name comes to mind or sounds familiar, Juice Williams, who led Illinois to the Rose Bowl in 2007. His real name was Isaiah Williams. They called him Juice Williams. They got trounced by USC and Pete Carroll at the Rose Bowl, but they did make it there and winning the Big Ten, or at least tying for a Big Ten championship. Anyway, this Isaiah Williams is an athlete. 5-star, number 1 player in Missouri, top 20 player in the country, according to the 247 composite. So basically, he's received offers from all the usual cast of characters, Alabama, Florida State, Ohio State, on down the line. But they all want him to play as a slot receiver, play on defense. So he wants to play quarterback, and Lovie Smith has said, we will play you at quarterback at Illinois. And so he is committed for the time being from St. Louis Trinity Catholic. So I just find that kind of interesting, especially since where I found this information, they believe that the connection could stay and the commitment could hold true and become a signing, because the new Illinois offensive coordinator is Rod Smith, who worked with Khalil Tate at Arizona last year. also worked in Rich Rodriguez offensive staffs in developing Denard Robinson and Pat White and those type of quarterbacks. So Isaiah Williams, a 5-star quarterback, commits to Illinois, and they also got a commit from a 4-star linebacker, a top 50 player, regardless of position, in Marquise Beeson out of Dallas. So Lovie Smith, coming off an 0-9 season in the Big Ten, maybe making some noise, and maybe what we expected from a coach who went to the Super Bowl at the NFL level and thought might make a bit of a splash at Illinois. Maybe it's 3 or 4 years in the making, but making some inroads in recruiting. So yeah, sure, Kevin.
I think I'm pretty sure Kentucky had offered him as well. I know I'd heard some talk about him. And I don't know if Ryan is still there, but another guy to watch out, a guy by the name of Cavassier Smoke. He's a running back that Kentucky got from Alabama that signed late. I think he's going to be, they have Snell, they have A.J. Rose and Siam King, but I think he's somebody who could come in, at the running back position and play this year and could be, the starter going forward. But it's interesting, Kentucky's gotten these commitments and they, from players like that, and none of them have stuck. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with this, situation with Illinois.
Mark Rogers TV, we are the voice of college football, meaning, hey, I've got a voice, but you as well as the viewer, your comments, suggestions, your discussion, your debate, we welcome it all right here at Mark Rogers TV. And we've got the voice of the best contributors in college football. If you look across YouTube or any of the internet platforms, over 100 contributors on in 2017 from the likes of 247 Sports, Last Word on College Football, SB Nation, Rivals, Scout, ESPN, all over the place. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, regardless of what team you love, because if you don't find the videos here, make the suggestion, find me the guy, or I will find the guy or gal to come on and talk college football from that particular team. So we appreciate it. Please like and comment as well. And if you just want to hear the audio, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, you can catch us right at Mark Rogers TV. Actually, just go to the description, and we've got the Podbean link to the audio copies of all the videos. Kevin McGuffey joining us from Last Word on College Football as we talk some live college football on a Saturday night. Kevin, we appreciate you stopping by and helping me shoulder the load.
Oh, no problem. It's always fun to come on, talk with you. Enjoy. I could probably talk about college football all night if I needed to or wanted to, but
I am right there with you. These are fun to do. I appreciate the comments from everyone and they drive the discussion. So you guys drive the discussion. I just get it started, and then it goes in whatever direction that you guys take it, and I just kind of follow along and provide my insight as well. So everybody, we appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and tell your family and friends that love college football that we're here and here each and every day. So Kevin, you have a great night, and we'll see everybody soon.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it very much. And thanks for everybody for hanging out and asking questions tonight.